Hello and welcome to the 12 Months to Marathon podcast with me, John Hill, the running podcast for the over 35s with Marathon Dreams. Episode 54, Why VO2 Max Matters. Now, I've been asked a few times on VO2 Max, so we're going to cover that today. What's been going on with me at the moment? Well, basically, first and foremost, this is actually episode 54. I did notice after the last episode that I did episode 51 twice and then episode 52. So let's not sweat the small stuff, folks, as I always get the occasional email from people telling me that I missed a word out in a sentence. So yeah, let's focus on what's important. So it's the content that matters, not the episode number. No one actually called me out on it, so that's fine. But I'm just letting you know we are back on track with episode 54. Great North Run for me in September is a big run here in the UK, quite a popular half marathon, quite difficult to get into. I'm very fortunate to be doing that for a charity, the Birmingham Children's Hospital, where I'm based here in the UK. It's a very famous children's hospital and a very good children's hospital that I've personal experience of using with my son on numerous occasions and also my daughter. It's also a charity that the late great Ozzy Osbourne, who's also here from Birmingham, supported, who tragically passed away this week as I record this. See, I'm doing that. There's no aspirations for me time-wise on the Great North. I just want to do it because it's an iconic event, and I like doing big events like that. It just means something. It's another string to the bow, and it's another thing that I want to do to add to the running resume. The big thing for me is going to be High Rocks in October, because that's the end of October, and I want to focus on that because that does stretch me out quite a bit, and that's something that I really want to get nailed and really want to get done in the best way that I possibly can. So that's the main focus for me, and the training for that starts officially in a couple of weeks in terms of getting myself ready for that. I've already started some baseline training for that, and I'm going to be doing more as of the start of August. So VO2 Max. Now, the reason why I'm doing this podcast today is because I've noticed some changes in my VO2 Max over the last couple of weeks and months, and I've linked that to a bit of rest and some changes in my training. Now, one of the reasons why I am quite focused on cardiovascular health is because of my history. You know, being an ex-smoker, being overweight and those sort of things, I didn't do very much in my 20s to help my cardiovascular health. So when I noticed that my VO2 Max particularly was going up, I paid a lot of attention to that, because I believe that having a strong cardiovascular system and having a strong heart is very important, because as I sit here, cardiovascular disease is still the number one killer of human beings on earth, early killer in terms of a metabolic standpoint. So I wanted to let you know that A, VO2 max is really important for runners to track, and I think it's one of the most important metrics. But B, as per some interviews I listened to with a guy called Dr. Peter Attia, ATTIA, it's a really good measure of longevity, and it's not spoken about enough. It's a good measurement of longevity that she's not spoken about enough. So I wanted to talk about that as well. So let's get into it. Let's do some of the sciencey stuff. I'll go on my background of working with it and understanding it, but I will give you some of the sciencey stuff based on some research that I've done for those people who like that thing. So it's your maximal oxygen uptake, basically, which is really how efficiently your body uses oxygen, really, based on your body weight, is the easiest way to explain it. Now, it's a good description I read about it. It's like a ceiling, yeah? So it represents your aerobic potential. So the higher your ceiling is, the more room you have to improve your endurance, performance, and recovery, okay? And that's important because it does tick those three boxes. It's not just about the lungs either. There's a few other things at play here. So obviously it's your heart, your blood vessels, and also your muscles. And I want to talk about the muscles particularly just because strength training does play quite a big part in it, which not a lot of people know. So if you look at it in terms of, if say for example, metaphorically, you're like an engine, right? The VO2 max is like your horsepower, yeah? So if you're training and you're trying to get a bigger aerobic base and a better aerobic base, and having a better VO2 max and a higher VO2 max is important. Now, this is where we need to be a little bit careful because, of course, as you know from listening to this podcast for a while, comparison is the thief of joy. So what should quote unquote your VO2 max be? It's an age adjusted thing. Now I'll tell you mine's 56. It has been 57. I've had it up to 58. And when I did my research experiment at Birmingham City University a couple of years ago, they measured my VO2 max with a proper heart rate monitor, connected to a bells and whistles fancy treadmill. And actually my Garmin at the time, which was the 245, I've now got the 265, was fairly close to the VO2 max. I think they had it at 54, so it was fairly close. Now top athletes are in the 70s, 80s, and some are in the 90s. If you are a good, average to good recreational runner, you'll probably find that it's going to be in the 40s or 50s. Okay. the good news is it's trainable and it's something you can focus on. And I would be focusing on this. I think this is really, really, really important. And we talked about performance and endurance. So let's tick the 3 boxes for runners and why you should focus on it. So there's 3 key areas. There's performance, there's speed, and there's recovery. Okay. So if the higher your VO2 max, the less fatigued your muscles get because your muscles get more oxygen. Okay, so a lot of people will say to me that they struggled at around 20 miles of a marathon, for example, or 8 or 9 miles of a half marathon, things like that. And we can use words like hitting the wall and all that sort of business. And a lot of that does come from fueling, which is a separate issue. But a lot of it, I believe, does come from your VO2 max. So having a higher VO2 max will delay fatigue somewhat as long as everything else is equal and you've trained properly and you've fueled properly. You can hold a faster pace with a higher VO2 max with less effort. Now, it doesn't mean it's easy, but what I've noticed particularly is on certain runs when my VO2 max has been higher, I've felt fairly comfortable at what you would deem to be quite fast paces. And I've even surprised myself. And I think when you start surprising yourself as a runner, that's a really good thing. And I think it's something that will really build your confidence and your competence as a runner when you start to surprise yourself around a certain pace. The last thing, which not a lot of people talk about, is recovery. So basically, the better oxygen delivery means recovery between workouts and actually while you're racing can improve as well. So it's also worth looking at for that. So those are your 3 key areas. So performance, speed, and recovery. Okay. Now, what boosts VO2 max specifically? What can you do? Okay. So in running terms, it's going to be, of course, it's going to be doing your standard aerobic base stuff, but interval training, hill repeats, tempo runs, so the more intense workouts that push the heart rate a little bit higher, okay, they're going to improve your VO2 max. Now, in terms of me, the biggest mistake that I make is I don't do enough speed work when I'm not training for something. And one of the reasons why I think my VO2 max is high is because when I've trained for marathons, I've always done all the speed work. And in fact, my training plans have always been mainly based around speed work, not just tons of miles, okay? So it's important that you do mix your training up. And it's important to also remember that when we're talking about pushing your heart rate, that's based on you. So there's no metrics here. An interval session, a threshold session, a tempo session, whatever you want to call it, is based on you, okay, and based on where you're at. So that's what you need to do. You need to mix up your training and make sure that you are including your speed work, okay? Now, we'll give you a bit more of a plan in a second. The other thing with VO2 max alongside running is also longevity. This isn't talked about enough, and this is something that I only recently discovered. And you think it might be a little bit obvious in terms of, obviously, the better cardiovascular health you've got, the less risk of disease, but not a lot of people talk about VO2 max. So a lot of people assume that running is bad for you. It's bad for your joints and all that sort, all those myths that we hear. So if you improve your VO2 max and have a focus on it and just be fit in general, of course, that's always going to help. But if you have a focus on your VO2 max, it's going to obviously reduce your risk of cardiovascular illness, which we've already talked about. Okay. It's going to improve your brain health and immune function and also what's called your insulin sensitivity, which is the opposite of insulin resistance, which in simplistic terms is type 2 diabetes. And also, as well, if you've got a higher VO2 max, you are better equipped to deal with the challenges in later life, which normally are the day-to-day activities that we do. People struggle in later life, not because they're not super fit. They struggle because they can't do basic day-to-day activities. So this will help with that as well. Okay. So it's really, really important that not only do you work on this from a running point of view, but you work on this from a longevity point of view as well, because it can really help you there. All right. So how do we improve it? Number 1, shockingly from me, consistency. Whatever you do, you need to be consistent, okay? And you need to here's a bit of a sidetrack. You need to understand that you can be consistent with running even if you're not training for a specific event. Consistency is the most important thing. So maintaining a level of consistency and keep your aerobic base up irrespective of whether you're training for something. And I say that because that's a mistake that I've made in the past myself, okay? The second thing, we talked about it, mix your training up. So include some interval sessions, tempo sessions, threshold sessions, okay? Keep it simple. Listen to my speed work, my speed, introduction to speed work, for more on this. So make sure that you're doing your sessions where you are pushing your heart rate high. Do it safely, do it controlled, get a coach, get some support if you need it, but make sure that you are doing that as well. And you're also doing your hill repeats, or if you're fortunate enough to be able to do altitude training, do that, because that's of course going to build your aerobic capacity, okay, and improve your oxygen uptake. Yeah, so make sure that you're mixing your training up with your running, irrespective of whether you're training for anything or not. And then finally, strength training, because of course the better defined and bigger muscles and stronger muscles you have, they're going to use oxygen more effectively. Now, this is quite a funny one because a lot of people do not consider this at all. They don't think that actually strength training, they just think, oh, it's going to prevent injury, which of course it does. But one of the reasons why I think I've done so well as a runner, and I've been very fortunate with injuries, I've had some, but I've been quite fortunate with it, is number one, because I'm strong. That's the first thing. And I think I've developed as a runner, I'm faster than I should be based on my weight according to certain charts, and I believe that's down to being strong. And I think also as well that strength training has not only improved the power in my legs and my muscles, it's also improved my VO2 max. And then of course the knock-on effect to that is of course it's meant that I've avoided most other injuries. Now, you have to look at your recovery as well, and that's why I did this podcast now, because I did a half marathon a couple of weeks ago. It was my third fastest ever, and I didn't really train for it, and I'd been ill and all this, so I did two really fast half marathons this year, my second and third fastest half marathon and my second marathon. And I noticed with the half marathons particularly, when I took time to rest after them and did some easy runs and eased myself back into training and even took some days off, that had a knock-on effect on my resting heart rate and my VO2 max. That's coupled with a focus on sleep. Now, I've been looking at things like my training readiness on Garmin and noticing how that's impacted by the rest, and also how my VO2 max has gone up and stayed even stable, even if I've not been pushing it. And I think it's a mix of pushing that heart rate quite high with speed work and then rest and recovery and letting my body adapt, if that makes sense. So when we talk about mixing up your training and improving your VO2 max through speed work, threshold work and tempo runs, that's alongside rest as well, okay? And that's including whether you're training for something. And when you notice with a good proper training plan, it's not all ground and pound. It is focused, performance-based training, endurance-based training, coupled with consistency, coupled with rest and easy runs, because you need that as well. Okay, so that's why this is really, really important, to make sure that you do get that rest and recovery so you can go all in. Now, funny enough, I did a run the other day, which I wasn't planning on being a quicker run, but because I'd recovered and I did some easy runs, I did a progressive run because I felt like it and it helped me. And then I noticed that my VO2 max stayed quite steady. So yeah, that's why it's important. So for me personally, I think this is something you should be definitely focusing on. I do think this is more important than certain things, because this is something that you look at after your run. You don't look at it during. It's one of those measures that sits alongside it, yeah? So I read a post the other day by somebody called The Planted Runner on Instagram. You should go and give her a follow. She's quite good. And she said it's what happens with our heart rates after our run that's more important. And I 100% agree and subscribe to that. I think that's a very important message to give out. So I think this is more important than a lot of the stuff that people are talking about, particularly the Zone 2 stuff. I think this is a better thing to focus on alongside that, as not only a measure of your improved running ability, but also a measure of longevity as well. That's why it's important. So that's episode 54, definitely episode 54, why VO2 max matters and why you should focus on it. So thank you very much for listening as always. Thank you very much for your support. Don't forget to head on over to @12months2marathon to follow me there. I've recently set up my free running community for the over 35s. All you need to do is go to my link in my bio and click that. You can join. It's totally free to join. It's a chance for me to connect with people and share some experiences and tips away from social media. And again, it's totally free to join. Feel free to join that. I'd love to have you over there. Don't forget to follow me while you're there. And with these podcasts, I do appreciate the follows and the subscribes. And if you can, drop me a review and a comment. That really helps, particularly on Spotify. The star ratings help me out a lot. So as always, thank you very much for listening. I do appreciate it. Hopefully that one's useful. And I'll look forward to seeing you all very soon indeed.